These knives are not dull. Neither is this interview with Conny Peña, the second owner of the Wildflower Cafe. Hi, this is Sean Powers with Conny Peña. She was a former owner of the Wildflower Cafe, and I'm going to do an interview with her. I interviewed Melanie Patrick, who is the person that first started the business, and now Conny was the person that took over after her. And she was basically an employee there that when she found out that the restaurant was up for sale, she decided to be the second owner. And it was pretty phenomenal because she's a really cool person, and it was nothing could be better than to have someone that knows the place that they're about to run. And I think that's a downfall of a lot of places when they resell, is that people know absolutely nothing about the business, but they thought it would be really cool to own a restaurant. But as my friend once said, if you like to cook, you shouldn't open up a restaurant, because then you're going to learn to really not like cooking. And so my first question is for Conny is, who are you?
Who am I? Well, first and foremost, I'm a restaurant owner. I have been for over 30 years now, off and on, mostly on more than off. Aside from that, I'm a mother of twin daughters. They keep me busy. Between these two things, I have my hands pretty full.
Yeah, being a restaurant owner is a handful.
It is.
Being a parent is a second handful. What's a third handful?
Just finding a balance between all of it and making enough time for myself and my well-being and what's going to keep me inspired and thriving and wanting to continue what I'm doing in a positive way. It's not always the easiest thing to do. And with that, the quote that you were saying that a friend told you once, I can say that I still do love cooking. I've never not loved cooking. I love baking. I love having my hands in food in any way, shape, or form. And I love that this industry allows you to expand your knowledge. There's never a shortage of learning. There's always something to learn. And I think if you feel like you've mastered it, you've cut yourself short a little bit.
That you mastered it?
Yeah, I don't think you can master being any one thing in the restaurant. I really think that this is one industry, and I think it's what really drives me, is that there's always something to learn. There's always something to improve upon. And you know, as a restaurant owner, you get the praise and you also get the critiques. And of course, with most things in life, it's the critiques that kind of stick with you a little bit longer and make you push a little bit harder or dig a little bit deeper. So I try and welcome them as much as I possibly can. I can't always say it's great, but it does provide me enough information to want to do better and provide better and keep going.
So a lot of my questions start with WH, and the who was double HO. Now my next question begins with what, and my what question is, what drove you to buy the Wildflower Cafe?
Gosh, for starters, I think it was I started working in the restaurant world when I was 15, and I did always love it. And I got lucky with my first job because I worked for a mom and pop shop. They made everything from scratch. I learned a lot in the process, but then at that time I was in high school, so I wasn't thinking that this was going to be a career choice for me. For me, like, college was in the horizon. But I did appreciate working in an environment where they didn't cut corners and quality was a priority for them. So I learned a lot in that realm. By the time I got to the Wildflower, I had worked in a few different restaurants that I knew I would never want to be around that type of food or that quality, or, you know, I kind of started refining what it meant to me to be both a customer and an employee of a restaurant. And I decided that by the time I moved to Arcata, I didn't want to work in a restaurant that I wasn't going to be proud of saying I worked at. And so the first time I came to Arcata to look for housing and stuff, I came into the Wildflower. I had a friend that was working there, Greg Gibbs, and he told me to put in my resume, and so I did. And he was doing me a big favor and kept moving my resume to the top of the pile until finally Melanie decided I have to interview her. At the time, I didn't get the job on the first interview. She called me maybe a couple weeks later as I had my car completely packed and ready to go on to the next adventure, thinking this isn't going to be the place for me. And so she called me, hired me, and I fell in love with every aspect of that restaurant, just who she was as an employer and as later my mentor, and then everybody that I worked with. I was probably one of the younger ones there at the time. Everybody was very welcoming and very, very invested in what they were doing. And I thought, this is the best environment I've been in as far as the restaurant goes. So when she came back from her Europe trip and decided to sell, my wheels just started turning like, is it possible that I could buy this place? And at the time that was all happening, I was all geared up to go to Spain and do school abroad because I was going to Humboldt State University at the time. And then everything just completely shifted. Once she and I sat down and started talking, I couldn't let it go. I just could not stop thinking that this was the next step for me. So she helped facilitate it, and we just made it happen. And it happened.
And another wet question is, what year was that?
I started working there in 91. I bought the Wildflower in 1995.
95, so you worked there for 4 years.
Yeah, almost 5, really.
And I do remember the day that you started working there.
Do you?
Yes. And what was your position when you started working there?
When I first started working there, I started off as a dishwasher. Yeah, I wasn't left on dishwashing. I had a lot of experience. So she moved me to the counter, and then I was quickly put on a wait person position and was on the floor. And I did that for a long time until I bought the restaurant, and then that wasn't where I was best suited anymore.
Right, because Melanie Patrick told me that it's hard to find employees to fit all the niches that are important to be filled. And what was your process for, as an owner of the restaurant, what was your process of hiring people?
I really tried to stay away from hiring my friends.
Yes.
Just because I wanted to keep them as friends. In truth, I made a lot of great relationships through the Wildflower, so most of my closest friends are still my closest friends came from there, but they weren't hired by me, they were hired by Melanie. So I kept a lot of people on, and then mostly, kind of word of mouth. The right people seemed to come in. I mean, of course, I had some bad eggs too, but that's all part of the learning process. I thankfully was lucky enough to have enough people that stayed with me for years and years, and they would leave, go on vacation, and they'd come back. So I was fortunate enough to have a good reputation with most of my employees.
Right, that's very important.
It is.
Because that's one of the things about the restaurant that I've always noticed was that predominantly everybody worked really well together, and there was a flow and a camaraderie that went on. And every once in a while you'd find someone would be hired, and you could just tell like they were on their own trip and they weren't working with everybody, and they had problems, and it just didn't work. When this is going to go into WHEN now, which is WHEN, is when did you feel like it was time for them to go?
I have always been really, really trusting of the people that work alongside of me. Melanie had once told me, as we were, switching roles, that the most important thing as a restaurant owner is to have your pillar employees, the ones that are going to support you throughout, and to know who those are. And ideally, you'd have 4 of them. And it wasn't so much like a management position, but as much as like these are people that understand your philosophy, understand what you're doing, and want to help you do it, and are invested in it as much as they possibly can be. And thankfully, I came into that restaurant as an owner already having that in place and having the support that I needed. So I really paid attention to what was said and listened to how they were getting along with new hires. And, I don't think nobody was ever vindictive or manipulative within that time that I was there for the most part. And I feel like it came from an honest place if it didn't work out with an employee. And most of the time, I didn't honestly have to do a whole lot of firing. I think that the energy in the room would shift enough that people would sense it and just know that there wasn't really a place there for them, or that wasn't a great fit. And so thankfully I wasn't often put in a position of having to actually fire somebody.
But you did sometimes.
I did, and I'll be honest, I cry almost every time. Even now, I hate it. That's my least favorite part of being a business owner, even if they deserve it.
Even if they deserve it.
Even if.
Ooh, doesn't it feel so good to fire you? But it doesn't.
It doesn't. I don't like messing with people's livelihoods, and I don't try and assume I know what's going on after they clock out. So it's hard to know where people are really at, and I'm careful about my relationships with employees. I try not to blur the lines too much, so I respect people's privacy. So it's kind of hard, when you're firing someone, you don't really know what's going on in the background of their lives that might have enabled a certain behavior that didn't work out. And so I'm careful about it as much as I possibly can be, unless it was like a blatant disrespect or stealing or something like that, which has also happened.
Right. People take advantage of being in the restaurant by themselves.
I think they think that, because you own a restaurant, it means that your pockets are full and
yes.
You have way more than they have. I don't think anyone, I wouldn't speak on behalf of everybody, but the majority of people that work for you don't realize that the job doesn't end at the end of a shift.
Right. Another when question was, when did you decide that there was time to move on?
I had twins, and I had also kind of hit that wall of feeling like, as much as I love the Wildflower and everything that it does, I felt like I kind of wanted to grow outside of just a vegetarian realm. And when I was pregnant, I kind of had to convert from vegetarianism and introduce some more proteins into my world, because being pregnant with twins was pretty depleting. And I think once I started diving into that, I started realizing limiting myself to a vegetarian diet kind of limits me in a culinary world also. And I sort of just wanted to check out different avenues, and not really immediately. I really wanted to spend time with my babies while they were babies. So that was the biggest driving force. And if I'm honest, there's often times where I question if that was the best idea. Like I missed it, and definitely had a bit of an identity crisis when I let it go.
I bet.
Almost 15 years there is a long, long time.
15 years?
Accumulatively, yeah.
Oh, okay, but not as the owner. So
No, 10 is the owner, and then
10 is the
almost
owner.
5 as an employee.
And so that having children was a big decision maker.
I had nannies at the time, so they were kind of helping, as much as they can so that I could be at the restaurant. But then, I'd come home and I'd read the notebooks and see that Natalia crawled for the first time, or
Right.
Izzy did this, and I felt like I was just missing out on the little things that were going to matter.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one, because I know Melanie's daughter, Sienna, pretty much grew up in the restaurant.
She was a little bit older, though, at the time, which,
Yes.
by the time I opened this place, my girls were very much a part of this place.
Right, and her reasoning for stepping out of the business was that she was preparing for her daughter to graduate from high school and go to college, and so she needed to make more money. Because a lot of times she wasn't making enough money, but she was creating a community service, and that was really what was interesting about our interview with her, was that she talked about how her experience with vegetarian restaurants was that the food wasn't really that good or tasty. It was like flat and bland. She just thought vegetarian food shouldn't be bland and turn you off. It should be enticing and exciting. And so when I want to kind of go back to the what question, was like, what did you do for the restaurant that changed it?
When I first took over, we closed for 2 weeks and painted the whole inside. I think I needed to kind of stake my claim in there a little bit. Not because I didn't want to follow in Melanie's footsteps, but because I kind of I guess I felt like I had something to prove to myself too. I changed the menu. I took the menu that was there and expanded on it, probably more ambitiously than I should have. But as you were saying, vegetarian food, it's probably one of the most innovative cuisines out there in terms of what you can do and how you can do it. And I think that people have this idea that vegetarian food is just beans and rice and maybe some cheese, and it's so much more than that, like so much more complex than that. And honestly, I think if you can cook vegetarian food, you can cook anything, if you can cook it well.
Right, and so did you reach out to other sources to make those menus better and more enticing?
I started more like tapping into the things that I would remember when I would go out to eat, like, wow, that was really good. And there was a baker at the Wildflower, of course, you know, Jan, and she was always thinking outside the box and converting things from like things that have dairy to something that was vegan. And I really loved that about her, is that her mind was always working that way. And I think that it kind of helped me not be afraid of thinking outside of the box also, and trying to be a little bit more creative. Even if it failed, I learned from it. And so I think, if anything, like, I just expanded the menu and kind of offered a little bit more based on what my personal likes were and what I would want to eat if I came into the restaurant.
Yes, I relate to that. Because the restaurant, as it switched owners, because I worked there through 4 different owners, and it always kind of changed out of necessity, maybe out of ego, like you're saying, but also out of necessity. And my next question is, where did you find your influence? Because the WHERE is, where did you find your inspirations?
A lot of it came from my father. He had me cooking pretty early on, and you know, I come from a pretty eclectic background. My mom's Dutch and German, my dad's Filipino and Spanish, so the culture clash of food was always a little bit interesting, and he definitely brought to the table literally some of the most interesting things. And so I kind of learned a little bit more about culture and incorporating different spices and stuff like that. So he would have been my first influence, but that was pretty limited. By the time I grew up in Southern California and then gradually moved north, and by the time I ended up in Santa Cruz, I was living with 5 women, and we used to do this thing because we were all broke students working in restaurants and stuff. We would all go to the library and check out a cookbook, and then there were 5 of us, so 5 days out of the week somebody would cook, and then 2 days we'd either potluck or put all the leftovers together and feast on them. So I learned a lot then, like, just kind of being creative with cookbooks and learning how to understand them better and work with them. And I would check out the weirdest books just to kind of bring something different or to check out something new. Because, honestly, like, I wasn't able to travel the way I would have liked to have traveled. So traveling through food was really the way I did it.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of conversions when you're using a recipe book as compared to a restaurant.
Yes.
And was that challenging?
Only if I felt like I hadn't actually had the dish before I tried to create the dish. It's different if you've like gone to an Indian restaurant and you've tried this food, and then you go home and you try and cook it. Because you have like these tastes in your mind of what it's supposed to be like. But when you're just going off of a book, and say it's a book with no pictures, you kind of really have to tap into your own intuition and senses. And actually, that was more challenging and fun for me than looking at a picture and being like, it's supposed to look like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And where are we at right now?
We're in Cafe Phoenix. This is my restaurant.
And this was your birth child, your child that you had after you left the Wildflower Cafe.
A couple years after. I sold the restaurant in 2005, and I opened this up in 2015. I had a couple juice bars in between. I worked for somebody, and I honestly feel like the entire time I was working for somebody else, I was cultivating this place in my mind. Like, this is definitely a culmination of all of my skill set, and definitely my favorite endeavor so far. The Wildflower is like will always be my first love, but Phoenix is definitely like what I've evolved into.
And the name refers to the phoenix rising out of the flames?
Yes.
And what were the flames?
To me, it's sort of on a personal level, like just going from where I was, because there's a moment there, I was married, and we kind of hit rock bottom. The economy crashed, we lost a business, we lost a home, and then we also went through divorce. So I kind of like had to rebuild completely from the ground up, and I really had to tap into everything that I know and trust, and use all of my resources to create this. And thankfully, I had invested enough time and energy and had put myself out there enough that people knew what I was capable of doing and trusted my process, so that I was able to get the financial backing to actually put this together. So yeah, Phoenix is me in a sense.
Rising out of the ash.
Yeah.
Now my next WH question is, why would anybody ever want to do a business like this?
I think that it was best brought together for me, because there's definitely days where I wake up and I question that myself, like, why am I doing this? But especially during COVID, the way things were going, and health became a top priority, and I started realizing, like, this is the one way I can connect to a community in a way that they need and that I feel good about. This restaurant and being part of the restaurant industry provides me a place to create community and a gathering, and when I think about what it is to go out to eat or to sit down at a table with food, it brings people together. And I think that element of this whole thing is so much more than what I can really express in words. It touches me to see people like eating food and they're happy with what they're eating, they're enjoying themselves, they're enjoying their company, and I'm able to create this experience for people, even in the background. Like, they probably, maybe most of them don't even know it's me, or that I'm part of all of this. But I think it's just important right now to remember where our food is coming from, what's going into it. And I think, in a society that's so removed from a food source, I think this is my way of being able to like provide sort of an educational idea of like how this can be done, how it can be done sustainably, how it can be done in a way that's creative, thoughtful, and offering more. Like, I get to work with all the farmers directly, and I love that. I love that aspect of it. So I don't know if I can answer that in any simple way. It's it's like a heart project, no matter how I explain it.
That was on my next question in the where world, was where do you get all your produce and where do you get your energy?
Start with produce first.
Yeah.
I am fortunate enough to live in an area where there is so much abundance as far as produce goes. I modeled this restaurant so that I could focus on the sustainability aspect of it. So I work with farmers. They give me a heads up seasonally what's coming up, what I should look forward to, and I sort of plan my menus accordingly. I have no problem taking something off the menu that is either depleting or is impossible to get. And it's been more important to me to show people that you can eat organically without spending all of your money, that it can be done well. And I've been grateful enough to be able to work with a lot of really quality farmers and other business owners to put this together.
Mm-hmm. And where do you get your energy?
I don't always have energy. I want to say that it's my employees, the people that I work with, that kind of pick me up and kind of uplift me and remind me of why we're here and why we're doing this. And it's not like every day that I'm needing to be reminded about that, but definitely this is not just about me, and it's never been about me. And even when I look at this restaurant, it wasn't even just created by me. This has been created by the community. And so, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not doing it just for me. I'm doing it for everybody I work with, all the farmers that I work with. And so it's a lot more. I'm a really small part of this in a lot of ways.
So going back to the what question is, what did the wildflower have to do with anything having to do with this place, the Phoenix?
The wildflower of all the restaurants that I worked at, the Wildflower taught me the most. What does it have to do with this place? Probably that a lot of the community that I created and became part of there has kind of trickled into here also. There's a lot of people that worked for me there that also have worked for me here. A lot of the same farmers. I was able to reestablish a lot of ties with people. As far as recipes go, I try really consciously to steer clear of replicating anything that I created over there. That's theirs, and I love sending people their way. So I don't feel detached from the Wildflower in a lot of ways, even though I haven't been there in a little while. I'm not as acquainted with the new owners. I still feel like it's very much a part of who I was and where I've been and how I came to this place right now.
Yeah, how? That was my next question. It wasn't a WH following WH, but it was a HOW. How do you do this every day? Or do you do it every day?
I do 5 days a week. I'm here, and usually I'm the first one in and the last one to leave. I don't know. Well, okay, I should say this. I've learned when we need to take a break. I've learned that being open 7 days a week for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is not sustainable for me or the people that work for me. I've learned to kind of listen to myself because I know that deep down I'm the pulse of this restaurant, and if I'm not firing at 100%, this isn't. Despite how amazing my employees are, I know that I'm the backbone of it. So how do I do it every day? That's just what I do.
You feel obliged?
Not necessarily obliged in the way that it's become a chore or an obligation as much as it's like a passion project for me. And I think when you're doing something that you truly love, it's not work anymore. It's so much more than that. I can't speak like that on any other job I've ever had. This one for sure. I am able to wake up. I can't say I'm always happy to wake up in the morning and come here, but once I'm here, I fall into my element, and it's, there's always like some little surprise that happens throughout the day. Either an old friend passes through that I haven't seen in years, or I meet somebody new. The list is long. The day is never the same as yesterday. So I always have that to look forward to.
Yep, that's true. And the last question I'm going to ask you it's in the realm of WH, and it sounds like weather, but the question is whatever you want to say to finalize this interview.
The one thing that I will say is that the Wildflower provided me a skill set, for one, but more importantly, it provided me a community and people in my life that I know I'm gonna be an old lady, and we'll still continue to check in with each other and make sure we're all doing okay. And so it provided me a family. And I came from a very broken situation, so by the time I got up here, I was kind of like maybe the misfit. I didn't really have family to fall back on at the time, and the Wildflower definitely created, I want to say it was a restaurant of misfits for the most part, and we all kind of were able to find something in common that would keep us threaded together. And even still, like, I have so many people in my life that I worked with and for, and that are still, the list is long. I feel like I was part of such an amazing experience there, and that it's unforgettable and something that I'll always hold dear to my heart.
Well, that's a good answer for whatever, because that sums up this interview. I try to keep these to about a half hour long. And as I said, the Wildflower Cafe was started in 1987, and it's been a continually running vegetarian restaurant ever since, through 4 different owners, all former employees of the restaurant that kind of took up the banner to wave for vegetarianism and restaurants, which is very important. And this is Arcata, California, and we just had an interview with Conny Peña, and this is Sean Powers. And my last little thing here for me to say to you is I love you and give a wave to the universe.
Love you.
We'll give a wave to the universe.
I like that.
Yeah, we'll give a wave to the universe.
That's what we're doing.
Okay, not a physical wave? Yeah, there we go. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.